Good morning, everyone. Let's look at route handlers, closure function, and controller. So the first one here is, let's look at the two types. You can see when you're using the controller handler, that means that you want to invoke the controller. The second one is that if you are using the closure function, that means that you want to get response back to the user immediately. So first, let's look at the closure handler. It is quick and tiny. So that means that you can use it to test your ping. It is used to test whether your route path is working perfectly. It has matched your HTTP method. You can say this is how you're going to write it. So automatically what you write inside this comment here will be returned to the user immediately without invoking any controller. So this is how you can write your closure handler function. So the pros and cons of it is fast to write. Immediately you write it, then you can get the response back to the user without going to access any other code. It is harder to test and reuse. You can't reuse it because it is attached to that route path. The next one is the controller handler. So the controller handler is invoking controller outside the file, outside the route. You can see whenever the route path matches the HTTP method, then it will invoke the controller. So the method of invoking the controller is simple. It's going to use these three parameters separated by @ the module name of the file you want to invoke, the controller name, and the method name. So this is how it works to invoke a controller if you're not using the closure function. So the pros and cons of this is the separation of concern, reusable skills for future. It is easier for you to unit test, and you can reuse it. Login controller, sign up controller, you can use it with 2 or more parts. For example, let's look at a scenario for this. Now look at this. Now let's assume that you have like 500 route paths to build for the backend developers. So it is easier for you to do what, to ping test them, to ping test this. Okay, I want to see whether this is already working with the get method. I want to see whether this is, so there is no available controller for that on ground. So you are going to do what, ping test them, to test those route path whether they are working perfectly. So that is one of the advantages of a closure handler, to test your application. So let's test. I got this for us again. So I got 2 route path, the one for closure and the one for controller. So you can see now on this closure function here, I wrote a function that is returning back to the user immediately. Let me say now I can save this. Fine. So let me go and test let me come and go and consume my API for the closure one. You see now when I'm consuming it, you can see it displaying testing the URL now. So this is returning with immediate effect. The second one is that I need to invoke the controller to get me the response. So it is easier. The UI dispatcher will go and look at this module name, look at this controller name, and fetch this controller name for me. See, this is the controller name, and see inside this controller, you see I have a lot of method here. But it will look at it and fetch this method because this is the method name I asked it to invoke for me. So I can say test controller in the class now, and save it. Let me go and consume that. That is the controller one. You can see the API. So you see now it's getting me this response with immediate effect. So you can see the difference between them is that the closure one will return the response with immediate effect, while the other one will invoke the controller before getting the code and returning it to the user. So let's make a decision for this. The decision now is, look at this. If it is more than ping, you're going to use a controller. If you are going to do validation, you're going to use a controller. But if you are doing a prototype, you're going to use a closure function. If you want it to be reused or tested, then you're going to use a controller method. So in our next video, we're going to look at how we are going to create a route, manage it, assign it for anonymous or other authenticated user. Thank you so much.